I'm a senior advisor at the Behavioural Insights Team, and I lead our research projects in schools. So what I wanted to talk through today is just give a bit of an introduction to the Behavioural Insights Team and our work in education, what we do, and then obviously talking through our response to COVID. So we've been really struck and been talking to the Education Endowment Foundation and others about the gaps that are likely to result from this crisis, and how we could potentially be part of helping to try and minimize those as much as possible. We've previously given workshops for Challenge Partners Hub, so I'm just going to quickly run through how we think that could work virtually as part of a response to COVID, and I'll also try and leave some time for questions. I'm dual screening, so if you leave a comment in the chat, I should be able to see it. So let me know if anyone's having trouble with the slides or hearing me. So I'll start with just a quick introduction to the team. So I know behavioural insights can sometimes seem like a vague term. It's really just ideas from psychology and economics that help to explain human behaviour and can be used to help drive positive behaviour changes. So drawing mainly from those two disciplines, psychology and economics. But before I get into things a bit more, I'll just start by posing this question. So exam results were worse than expected in 2002, 2004 and 2006, and this is particularly true for boys. The trend didn't continue in 2008. Can anyone offer a response as to why this might have been the case? And I'll give about 30 seconds for people to jot things down in the chat. Okay, very quick. I think this is the quickest people have ever got to precisely the right answer. So yeah, this is Euros and World Cups. So in 2002, 2004, and 2006, England qualified for the European Championships or the World Cup. In 2008, with Steve McLaren as manager, we did not qualify. And what you see, researchers have looked at the impact of this, and it's an incredibly huge effect in terms of academic performance, particularly for boys. It's the equivalent of going from an outstanding teacher to an average one. And the researchers also looked at the impact in terms of lifetime earnings. And their estimate is that watching a few games of football leads to a £20,000 difference in earnings over lifetime. So a really huge effect, bigger than almost anything that the government has tried to do to improve outcomes in this area, but not one of the traditional things that we focus on when we're talking about education policy. I guess the point that I'm making in this presentation, and lots of the work that we've done highlights, is that smaller influences on behavior, like watching a few games of football, can make a really big difference. Okay, now just before we dive in, can I get everybody to put their hands up? And then put your hands down when you know the answer to the next question, which is going to flash up on the screen now. So what is 2 times 2? I see everyone putting their hand down pretty quickly. Hands up again, please. And put them down when you know the answer to this question. What is 24 times 17? And so hopefully you felt a bit of a, maybe not for anyone of a maths teaching background, but you felt a bit of a difference there between those two sums. So I know for me, 2 times 2, we know instantly. 24 times 17, I really need to think a little bit. And what this demonstrates is the two ways of thinking. And this is a theory popularized by Daniel Kahneman, who won the Nobel Prize for his work on this. And if you've read the book Thinking Fast and Slow, then this will be a little bit familiar. What Kahneman essentially outlines is that we have two modes of thinking, system one and system two. And system one is our fast thinking. So when I ask you what's 2 times 2, you immediately know that the answer is 4. And then I'm sure for some of us at the moment, the daily commute is just walking from the bedroom into the living room. So you can definitely do that using system one. System two, on the other hand, is slow and much more deliberate. So when we're asked to calculate 24 times 17, we have to really start, engaging a bit of conscious thought to try and work that out, most of us. And then similarly, hopefully, one day we will all be able to travel overseas again. And when you're on a trip on holiday, you have to be much more engaged in where you're going, paying attention to signs, and much more focused to get to where you want to go. And this kind of dichotomy between system one and system two becomes important because when governments are designing policies or people are thinking about practices within education, we'll often be thinking really carefully about those using our system two. And it can be really easy not to recognize that often people who are trying to influence may well be using their system one. So it would just be exhausting to use system two all the time. So a lot of the time we're in system one. And when we're using system one thinking, we're quite prone to bias, and environmental effects on behavior can have quite a large impact. So just a bit more, before I dive into some examples, a bit more about the history of the team. So we started life inside number 10 as part of the Cabinet Office, a very small team back then. And our mission was to help people to make choices that improve their lives and society. So some of our early work, those of us who are familiar with the team might know this, we worked on trying to encourage people to pay their tax on time. And what we did is we added one line to the tax collection letter, just letting people know 9 out of 10 people in your local area pay their tax on time. So using what's called a social norm. And we found that just that one line was very powerful. So it brought forward a huge amount of revenue for the government, which the government's then obviously able to use on their spending priorities. So since those early days, the team's grown a lot. We've now got a dedicated education team of 10 staff, and we cover all of the different policy areas and are also international. Now, we love a framework at the Behavioural Insights team. This is kind of a behavioural insight in itself. And the main one, which we talk about, is EAST. And what we say with EAST is if you're trying to encourage any kind of behaviour, and that might be, how to motivate a student, how to get parents to be more engaged with school, you need to make that behaviour easy, attractive, social, and timely. I'm just going to run through a couple of examples of our work that I think are quite relevant to the current situation. So we've previously done some work on how we could improve parental engagement. We've run a lot of projects in this space. And for this one, we were looking at how can we encourage parents to help their children revise. So I know from my experience at school and teaching, schools are often very good at talking to parents after a test has happened. A report might get sent home. There might be a parents' evening. But there's often less communication before that test when maybe some communication might have an impact. And we also knew, so we often run what we'll call an explore phase when we're running a project. And we heard from lots of parents, they really want to be involved, but they're not sure what to do. And if, when they ask their kids about their homework, they often, get a shrug as the best response. So to try and combat that, we tested this intervention, which was a timely prompt for parents, letting them know when their child has a maths test coming up. So this message you're seeing on the left, Raj has got a maths test on Friday. Please remind him to study and help in any other way that you can. And what we think this message did is allow parents to have a bit of a different conversation. So now they could say, oh, you've got a maths test on Friday. What are the things that you need to do to get prepared? And we assessed the impact of this in a randomized control trial. This was funded by the Education Endowment Foundation. and the result was that it improved maths grades by the equivalent of 1 month of teaching. It was more impactful for more disadvantaged students. We did some surveys afterwards, and parents were very keen to do it again. It's maybe not so surprising. I think the really neat thing here is we surveyed both students whose parents had received the messages and students whose parents had not. And the pupils whose parents had received the messages were more likely to say that they wanted the messages to continue. And the sort of gist of the survey responses was, that was really annoying that you texted my parents and then, they were on my back a little bit, but actually it was useful. I mean, it's quite neat that from the survey responses, it seemed like the students recognized that. So we've also done work in further education colleges, and this is looking at the importance of motivational messages, which I think is really timely right now. So we sent one message a week to try and improve motivation for learners. And what we can see from the results of this randomized control trial is that it improved attendance and, I think more impressively, improved exam passes as well. So we kind of routinely run lots of research projects in schools. That's very much my day-to-day, and obviously all of the projects that I've been running have all been affected by COVID. And in our conversations with the education community, we've obviously been talking about the gaps that might arise as a result of the crisis. So we've been really keen to look at what we can do as part of a response to the current situation. So I'm just going to run through a few of the things that we've done. So one of the first things we did was launch Teach Together, working with the Chartered College of Teaching. So this is a free text message service that's designed to support teacher wellbeing during the crisis. So I think I would really echo what Kate said at the start about the importance of very public thank yous, and I agree. It would be great if the Prime Minister could do that. But what we're trying to do with Teach Together is highlight some of those thank yous and help support the well-being of teachers. So it's a weekly text message that goes out. Some of the messages have tips and resources. Some have quotes and stories from other teachers, or prompts to engage in different well-being activities. I think the nicest message that we've had so far that's got really great engagement is we sent out this text on the right, asking teachers to share a small thing they would do in the evening to switch off from work by replying to the text. And we got kind of an overwhelming amount of responses to that. And there's a lovely page on the Chartered College of Teaching's website, which lists all of those responses. And we're now up to just a little over 3,000 teachers signed up. You don't have to be a member of the Chartered College to sign up either. So if that sounds interesting to you and your schools, I'd be really grateful for you spreading the word on Teach Together. Another thing we've done is working with the Education Endowment Foundation on their guidance on communicating with families. That's kind of building on our work on parental engagement. So this is available on their website. I would really recommend it as a resource. Another thing which we just got confirmed yesterday is that we'll be working with one of the largest online maths homework platforms in the country to apply behavioural insights to what they're doing to try and increase student engagement, motivation, and persistence with tasks on that platform. So we're really excited about that work as well, which will be starting very soon. We also have some open access resources on behavioural insights for education. So the most relevant one here is on the left, the practical guide, which is available online. If you search that title, it should come up. Send me an email if you can't find it. Now, the final thing I wanted to chat through is our offer that we've got around virtual behavioural insights workshops. So we've previously run a couple of in-person workshops for a couple of challenge partner hubs, and we found that those had worked really well. So yes, where we're coming from with this is that many of the impacts the education of COVID-19 on education are behavioural, or have a behavioural aspect to them. So, three things to highlight here. So we've seen, polling that lots of, not very many children in state secondaries attending online lessons every day. We know that keeping students motivated to complete work at this time is a huge challenge. So on that project with our EdTech partner, we know that students are being set a lot of tasks but are not necessarily completing them, and that's really, really difficult when teachers don't have that face-to-face contact. And we also know from polling that we've seen that parents definitely want to help, but they aren't sure what they should be doing and how they could best help. So we've got experience in some of these areas. So particularly remote learning, we've worked with a few different EdTech organizations. We've done lots of interventions online, and similarly in parental engagement. So also to say, this looking towards the new normal, that we can, we can also look at workshops which are on the face of things kind of unrelated to COVID. So I know for the Chrysalis Hub, we ran a Raising Aspirations workshop applying behavioural insights to that challenge a few months ago. This is just to highlight what a workshop could look like. So this takes the example of remote learning. So we would give an introduction to behavioural science, go through that EAST framework, go through lots more examples of all of our work in education, and then kind of dive into whatever the theme would be. So in this case, what works for remote learning, sharing that evidence, and then using online EAST cards that we've developed to generate ideas for how to, for example, improve engagement with remote learning, and then how you could prioritize those best ideas and plan implementation. In terms of the logistics for these, this is what we think would work well, but it's all quite flexible. So we'd probably look to do a 2-hour workshop over Zoom, where you can do breakout rooms for small groups within that platform. We think these kind of workshops work best for between 15 to 30 participants. And the model that we've done previously is hubs inviting all of their schools to the workshop, so you can kind of get maximum value from them. As I said, there can be a kind of bespoke and tailored focus and content. And we're offering these at a cost which is kind of the absolute lowest we can possibly do. And in terms of the team delivering this workshops, Anna heads up the team, and then myself, Riz and Catherine, who work on our schools projects, are all former teachers who now have experience in behavioural science. So that's just a very quick run through of who we are, a bit of our COVID response, and a bit of an offer around the workshops. I'll just allow you to take a moment now to open up an email to me. And if you're interested at either of these levels, either write down one number or 2 numbers or 3 numbers, whether you think Teach Together is a good idea. We'd love to get feedback on that. If you're interested in a workshop, but also be great to hear, and we can then discuss what would work best for your hub. And then the third one is we do expect that we will get back to running research projects in schools, and we're always looking for schools who are interested in participating in that kind of thing. So if that sounds like something of interest to you, feel free to put the number 3 in your email as well. And when opportunities arise, I can be in touch with the offer, and you can decide if it's something you'd like to be a part of.